Hello my viewers and welcome back to my channel. Subscribe, like, and feel free to be part of this conversation. Now in this thought-provoking video, an Asian lady challenges the prevailing narrative surrounding the transatlantic slave trade by highlighting a seldom discussed aspect of history. Now with both assertions, she contends that focus on one particular racial group's experience overlooks the broader context of slavery's pervasive presence throughout human history. Now when she talks about one particular racial group, we all know which group she's talking about. The Black community. As she keeps on talking, she takes us into the complexities of this contentious topic. She urges viewers to reconsider conventional perspectives and confront uncomfortable truths about the universality of slavery across civilizations. Now, I have a problem with what she's talking about in the video, but I'll let you watch the video. Then when I get back, I talk more about it.
Hi, hello. This is going to be shocking for many of you to hear, but did you know that Black people are not the only race to have historically experienced slavery? I know this is shocking, but pretty much every civilization in the history of mankind, at some point, their ancestry owned slaves. Because slavery was a worldwide human rights issue for a very, very long time, for many centuries. So it doesn't matter if you're white, Black, Asian, Hispanic, whatever. Very likely at some point, your ancestry down the line owned slaves. Doesn't make it right, but that was just the way of the world for a very, very long time. So all these comments like, you're not Black, you can't speak about slavery. It doesn't matter what color your skin is. Slavery was a human rights issue across the world, across all races and all civilizations for a long time. And the United States was one of the first countries to abolish it very quickly and efficiently. So all the comments about being a non-Black person, you can't speak about slavery, every single civilization has experienced slavery at some point.
Now everybody wants to be oppressed now. Really? There is no comparison to the transatlantic slavery that happened to Africans. Stop that shit. African folks lost their land, their language, their spirituality, their families, their name. And when they got to the States, they were told they were what, 3/5 human? This same group of people didn't even get a chance to vote in this country until what, 1960 something? There's no damn comparison. Stop that shit. Let's not forget about Jim Crow and segregation that's affected these group of people still to this day. Still to this day, family. I'm tired of that I was oppressed too bullshit.
It is so bizarre to me how the Asian American community does this. Oh, before any of you guys come at me, I'm just as Asian as she is. I have seen this with non-Black people of color, specifically in the Asian community, where they equate their experience with the Black experience when they're just not even comparable. To say that you can speak on slavery because it has happened everywhere, even though you are living in the United States. When the anatomy of government, the Constitution, was all synthesized during an era when the economy depended upon slavery, specifically of Black people, language like this is just so unbelievably harmful. I'm not saying that we didn't struggle, but to play this weird game of oppression Olympics when we immigrated more recently, where the building blocks of this country did not incorporate us or take us into consideration when we're essentially built upon the downfall of one specific community. You're weird for that. You're weird for that.
So many non-Black people of color who just hate Black people with a passion because they think that white people are going to see them as equal. It doesn't work. Every time I see people who are Asian, Native American, Hispanic, and they come here and they're like, oh, but at least we're not Black. And then white people treat them like absolute garbage. They're shocked. What did we do to everyone else? What did Black people do? Please tell me a point in history that we just somehow went against everybody else and made their lives living hell. Tell me right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and stop you right there and go ahead and call out the bullshit. True, Black people were not the only people to be enslaved. We were just a long list of people who were already enslaved. But Black people were one of the only people who, if you were born a slave, your children was a slave, their children were slaves. Everyone from down your line was always slaves. See, we say the whole world has experienced slavery. That is not true. Only certain colors have. Most people experience servitude, being servants. There is a big difference between being a servant and a slave. But America had this thing by telling us that we're just slaves and everybody went through this. Everybody had this done. So where are the slave Bibles for the other races? Where are the Bibles that telling them that they were born this way and that this is right? And that if they're not subservient, then they're going against the wills of God. And I mean, I haven't seen too many picnics involving anybody other than a Nick So,
All right, now, while the commenter's assertion that slavery has historically affected various races is technically accurate, her attempt to equate the experiences of different ethnic groups overlooks the unparalleled brutality and systematic oppression endured by Black people during the transatlantic slave trade. It's important to recognize that while slavery has indeed been a tragic reality across many cultures and civilizations, the scale and severity of the African slave trade were unparalleled. The horrors of the transatlantic slave trade inflicted unimaginable suffering on millions of Africans who were forcibly uprooted from their homelands, subjected to dehumanizing conditions during the Middle Passage, and sold into lifelong bondage. Now, Black people endured not only physical brutality, but also endured the stripping away of their cultural identities, languages, and familial bonds. The legacy of slavery continues to disproportionately impact Black communities today, perpetuating cycles of systemic racism, economic inequality, and social injustice. The intergenerational trauma inflicted by centuries of slavery and its aftermath cannot be overlooked or diminished. Now, while acknowledging the universality of slavery is important for understanding global history, it's imperative to confront the unique and enduring legacy of anti-Black racism and the unparalleled suffering endured by Black people throughout history. Any attempt to downplay or diminish the severity of Black people's plight undermines efforts to address ongoing racial disparities and injustices. Enslaved Africans were subjected to inhumane treatment during the Middle Passage, the journey across the Atlantic Ocean. Packed tightly into overcrowded and unsanitary ships, they endured starvation, disease, and extreme brutality at the hands of slave traders. Slaves were treated as property, stripped of their basic human rights, and subjected to physical and psychological abuse. They were often branded with hot irons, whipped and subjected to other forms of torture to maintain control and enforce obedience. Now, families were torn apart as slave traders sold individuals to different owners, leading to the fracturing of familial bonds and the loss of cultural heritage. The legacy of slavery continues to affect Black communities today, manifesting in systemic racism, economic inequality, and disparities in access to education, healthcare, and employment opportunities. Even after the abolition of slavery, Black people in the United States first legalized discrimination through Jim Crow laws, segregation, and racial violence, further exacerbating their marginalization and oppression. The trauma inflicted by centuries of slavery and institutionalized racism has had enduring psychological effects on generations of Black people and communities, contributing to issues such as mental health disparities and intergenerational trauma. Now, Black people have had to fight tirelessly for their civil rights and equality, from the abolitionist movement to the civil rights movement of the 1960s to contemporary movements such as Black Lives Matter. So by highlighting these points, we can better understand the unique and devastating impact of the transatlantic slave trade on Black people and the ongoing struggle for racial justice and equality. Now, enslaved Africans were subjected to backbreaking labor on plantations, mines, and other industries without compensation or recourse. Their labor built the economic foundations of nations like the United States, yet they received little to no benefit from their contributions. Female slaves in particular were vulnerable to exploitation and abuse by their owners and overseers. They were often subjected to rape and violence, further degrading their humanity and dignity. The institution of slavery was supported by dehumanizing ideologies that portrayed Black people as inferior and unworthy of basic human rights. Now, these ideologies were used to justify the subjugation and mistreatment of enslaved Africans and perpetuated harmful stereotypes and prejudices that persist even to this day. Enslaved Africans resisted their enslavement through acts of rebellion, escape, and sabotage. However, their resistance was often met with severe punishment, including torture and unalivings, as a means of maintaining control and deterring further defiance. Black slaves experienced intersecting forms of oppression based on race, gender, and class, compounding their suffering and marginalization within society. Now, this intersectionality underscores the unique and multifaceted nature of the Black people oppression. The legacy of slavery continues to impact Black communities worldwide, contributing to complex issues such as generational poverty, educational disparities, and overrepresentation in the criminal justice system. Addressing this legacy requires acknowledging and confronting the enduring effects of historical trauma on individuals and communities. Now, enslaved families were routinely separated through cell or forced migration, causing profound emotional trauma and disrupting the transmission of cultural and familiar traditions. Children were often torn from their parents, and spouses were sold to different owners, resulting in profound and enduring anguish. Enslaved Africans were forcibly stripped of their cultural identities, languages, and religious beliefs. Many were forbidden from practicing their native traditions and were instead forced to adopt the customs and religions of their oppressors, further eroding their sense of self and community. Enslaved Africans were denied access to adequate health care, leading to widespread illnesses, injury, and premature unalivings. Their suffering was exacerbated by the lack of medical attention and the use of crude and ineffective treatments, resulting in high mortality rates among enslaved populations. Slave owners employed psychological tactics to maintain control and instill fear among their enslaved laborers. This included the use of violence, intimidation, and propaganda to suppress resistance and reinforce notions of racial inferiority, creating a climate of terror and psychological trauma. Enslaved Africans were denied legal protections and recourse against exploitation and abuse. Slave codes and other discriminatory laws stripped them of basic rights and subjected them to harsh punishments for minor infractions, perpetuating a system of legalized oppression and injustice. We have come to the end of the video. Share your thoughts as well in the comment section. Thank you for watching and see you in my next video.